Welcome back, and in this lesson I want to cover a really important feature of S3 and Glacier that you need to be aware of for the exam. Now, you don't need to understand the implementation, just the architecture. S3 Select and Glacier Select are ways that you can retrieve parts of objects rather than the entire object. Now, I expect that this will feature only in a minor way in the exam, and it will be focused on architecture and features, but I do want you to be aware of exactly how this feature works. So let's jump in and step through its architecture and what benefits it provides. Now, you know by now that both S3 and Glacier are super scalable services. You can use them both to store huge quantities of data. S3, for example, can store objects up to 5 terabytes in size and can store an infinite number of those objects. Now, often when you're interacting with objects inside S3, you intentionally want to interact with that full object. So you might want to retrieve that full 5 terabyte object. What's critical to understand as a solutions architect is that logically, if you retrieve a 5 terabyte object, then it takes time and it consumes that full 5 terabyte of transfer. So if you're downloading a 5 terabyte object from S3 into your application, then you consume 5 terabytes of data. You're accessing that full object and it takes time. Now, you can filter this on the client side, but this occurs after the figurative damage is done. You've already consumed that capacity. You've already downloaded that data. Filtering it at the client side just means throwing away the data that you don't need. S3 and Glacier provide services which allow you to access partial objects. So that's what's provided by the S3 Select and Glacier Select services. And the way that you do this is that both services allow you to create a SQL-like statement. So a cut down SQL statement. So you create this, you supply it to that service, and then the service uses this SQL-like statement to select part of that object, and this part, and only this part, is sent to the client in a pre-filtered way. So you only consume the pre-filtered part of that object, the part that you select. So it's faster and it's cheaper. Now, both S3 Select and Glacier Select allow you to operate on a number of file formats with this level of functionality. So examples of this include comma-separated values, JSON. You can even use bzip2 compression for comma-separated values and for JSON. So it's a really flexible service. Now, visually, this is how it looks. Now, at the top, we have the architecture without using S3 or Glacier Select, and at the bottom, we have the architecture when we utilize these services. So in both cases, we have an application which stores its data on S3. So when an application interacts with S3 to retrieve any data, the entire object or stream of objects are delivered to the application. So the application receives everything. It can either accept it as a whole, or it can perform its own filtering. But the critical thing to understand is that any filtering performed by the application is performed inside the application. It doesn't impact the cost or performance. Any data which is filtered out is simply discarded, but it's still billed for and it still takes time. Now, contrast this to using S3 Select with the same architecture. So we still have the same application that interacts with the same S3 bucket. It places the filter point inside the S3 service itself, and this allows us to use a SQL-like expression and provide this to the S3 Select service. The S3 Select service can then use this SQL-like expression, and it can apply this to the raw data in S3. So in effect, it's taking the raw data, filtering it down, but this is occurring inside the S3 service, so the data that the application receives is the pre-filtered data. And this means that we can achieve faster speeds and a significant reduction in cost. Because the filtering occurs before it's transferred to our application, it means that we get substantial benefits both in speed and in cost. And this is because the S3 service doesn't have to load all of the data and deliver it to the application. We're applying this filter at the source of the data, which is the S3 service itself. Now, this is a feature which your applications will need to explicitly use it, but as a solutions architect, it's a powerful feature that you need to understand to improve the levels of performance in any systems that you design. Now, at this point, that's everything I wanted to cover. I want to keep it brief because it's a product that I only expect to feature in a very, very minor way in the exam, but I do want you to be aware of its existence. So thanks for watching. Go ahead, complete this video, and when you're ready, I'll look forward to you joining me in the next lesson.